I'm going to talk you through some new features of Java 14. First, we'll have a look at how to configure Eclipse to use Java 14. That's the Eclipse versions that are around now in the summer of 2020. Then we'll have a look at the enhanced null pointer exception, the Java text block, pattern matching on instance of, switch statement enhancements, and Java 14 records. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so if we want to use some of the compiler functions of Java 14 in Eclipse, it's not quite working. So you can see here I'm using Java 14, but if I want to use something, for example, like the text block with 3 quotes, it's putting in the 4th quote for me, and it's just not working. It's expecting 4 quotes, it keeps putting that 4th quote in, and it's not working because we're not using the Java 14 compiler in for the Eclipse. If we look in preferences, we've got Java 14 selected, but when we go into compiler, the highest compliance level we can do is Java 13. So what we need to do is we need to go into help, install new software, and paste this path. I'm going to call the server name Java 14 support, just to remind me later why I've added it. And then we can select Eclipse Java 14 support for 2020-03 development stream and install that plugin. Just accept the default values and accept the license agreement. And when it's finished installing, it will restart Eclipse. Okay, so now Eclipse is restarted. We can go into Java compiler and we can switch into Java 14 compliance level. We do a rebuild, and now the Java 14 features should work. Now for the text block to work, because text block is a preview feature of Java 14, we just need to go into the compiler, so Windows Preferences, Java compiler, and enable preview features for Java 14 and apply that. And then our text block line is working. We've got a warning to suppress because we kept the warning shown in here, but we can ignore that. And then our text block works perfectly. Okay, so I'm going to show you a small enhancement in Java version 14 of the null pointer exception error messages. So as Java programmers, I'm sure we're all very used to the null pointer exception. It's when we try and access fields or methods in an object which is null. So I've written this little program here. In the main method, I'm just calling another method, add string lengths, with 2 strings, hello and world. And what this method is doing is it's taking the 2 strings, getting the length of each of the strings, and outputting the sum of the 2 lengths. So if we run this, we get 10. That's 5 characters in hello and 5 characters in world. Now if I was to change one of these parameters to be null, then we get a null pointer exception, at line 12 and we look at line 12 and we can see that the null pointer exception has happened on this line, but we don't know whether it's my string 1 which is null or my string 2 which is null. So what we could do is we could go into the run configuration and arguments and VM arguments and put this argument here. I'll put it up on the screen so you can see it more clearly, but it's -XX colon plus show code details in exception messages. If we apply that and now we run the same program, we get some additional information in the null pointer exception, and it's detailed information. It says we can't invoke string length because my string 2 is null. Now if you write Java code, you'll get used to the fact that you're going to get a lot of null pointer exceptions. So that additional information there doesn't seem like much, but it's really helpful because we don't have to go into the program, debug it and see which one is null. We just get the straight error message telling us that my string 2 is null, so we can't invoke string length method on it. I'm going to write some code. I'm going to create a string and I'm going to put some HTML in that string. So I'll just do that now. So in this string I'm going to have HTML as an opening, and then I'm going to have a new line, and then in here I'm going to go onto the new line, and the next line is going to be body, and then another new line, so escape character N, and then I'm going to put a H1 flag for heading level 1, and in that I'm going to put a string, and I'm going to just say my, and string I'm going to put in quotes, so I need to escape character for the open quote, string escape character again for the close quote, and then escape a new line, and then another line, and then I'm going to put this this Latin phrase which is often used in typesetting. I'm sure you've seen it before. It looks something like this. It begins with lorem ipsum. And then we want a new line after that, and we want that in a paragraph. Close paragraph there, and then finally we want to close the body, and close the HTML. Maybe we'll have a final new line on the end. So that's our string. Now our system out print my string, and it should output that HTML. Okay, so that's worked. I may want to put a few extra I forgot to close the H1, and I seem to put the new line before the closed paragraph. And I'm going to put some additional lines in there. Okay, so that's our string there. Now what Textblock does is it allows us to get a piece of plain text and stick it in the middle of our Java program. So what we can do is here, if I just repeat, I'll do my string 2. This time I'm going to use Textblock. So I'm going to use 3 open quotes and 3 close quotes. I've just got an error because I'm calling it my string again. And here we can put the text in plain text. So I can put HTML. Just indent twice. Body H1 my string. And then we've got the same thing in Textblock, so we've not had to escape characters, and we can put new line characters as new lines in the code. So if we run this, we end up with pretty much the same thing twice. We've actually got the spaces in here, whereas in here the indenting I was doing was, well, I suppose I should have done it like that. But the point of Textblock is we've got literal string text that we can paste in the middle of our code, so that could be useful. So that's the basics of Java Textblock. There's a bit more we could do. For example, we could put backslashes at the end of the line to say that we want the new lines in here not to be translated into new lines in the final code. We can also do in the final output. So there's also things we can do about white space and margins and that sort of thing. So I've got this simple program here. It's got a main method which is going to create a string, and that string at the moment is just hello world. And then I'm calling another method check for long string with that. The check for long string is taking in an object, and it's going to check to see if our object is a long string. Now when I say long string, I mean more than 15 characters long. So first I can say if my object is an instance of a string, then I can cast my object to a string. So I say string, my string is my object casted to a string. I know it's safe to do that because I've just checked that it is a string. And then I can say if my string length is greater than 15, system out print line, my string is a long string. So let me just run that and see. It doesn't do anything because hello world is not a long string. But if I just put some exclamation marks to make it more than 15 characters long, my string is a long string. Now this is how you would have to write your program prior to Java 14, but let's see what we can do in Java 14. First thing we can do is we can get rid of this casting line. We can now say in the instance of line, if my object instance of string, my string there, and we can get rid of the casting line. We've already cast it to a string in this single line. So now if we run again, we get the same thing. But that of course won't work prior to Java 14. And we can also access it in this method, in this expression here. So I can say straight away, if my object instance of string, my string, and my string dot length is greater than 15. So I've got rid of all that and put everything in one line. I've just got to get rid of that bucket there, and the program should work just as before. So hello world with the exclamation marks is a long string, just hello world on its own isn't. And if I were to pass in something that just just a new object. Then that would also work. It's not a long string. Okay, so that's pattern matching on instance of, a new feature in Java 14. So in this example, this is the previous way of doing things. So I've got a main method which is going to call get days in months for each month in 2020. So the parameters for get days in month are month and year. That's going to just system out print line days in month and the month number, and it's going to initialize days to -1, and then it will do switch on month, and for 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10 and 12 days is 31, and for these months 30 days has September, April, June and November, so those months return 30 days. And for February, if the year mod 4 equals 0, there's 29 days in leap years, else 28. So if we run that, we get days in month 1 31, month 2 29 because it's a leap year and I've done it on 2020, days in month 3 31, etc, etc. So if you'll be familiar with that if you've done switch statements in Java, but let's have a look at how it can work in Java 14. So really it's just a syntax change. So what we can do, we can comma separate these here. So case 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10 and 12, and then instead of having the colon, we have a hyphen and an arrow, and then only the next line of code after that will run for those cases. So for 9, 4, 6 and 11, hyphen arrow, days equals 30, and for case 2, hyphen arrow. Now because we want to run some code in here, we just need to put this in a block. And then return days. So that so far is exactly the same as we had before. So we've got exactly the same result, but we've compacted our switch statement down quite a bit by having just the case keyword followed by all of the options that we want to do a particular thing, rather than listing them out all the way. Also, we're not doing break when we use this. We're not doing break, we're running into this line or this block. When we were using the colon before, we would set days to 31, and then we'd have to break out to stop the rest of the switch statement running, which I always thought was a bit strange, but we don't need to do that anymore. We have the hyphen and the greater than symbol, and then it just runs the next line of code or the next block of code. We can also take this a stage further, and we can say, instead of initializing days to -1, we can say days equals and then the switch statement. And then what we could do here is, instead of saying days equals 31, we just put the value that we want to come out of the switch statement directly after the arrow. Because the case of February, we have some code to run. We want this to be 29 and 28, but we can't just do it like that. So we have a new keyword, and that is yield. So yield is to return a value out of a switch statement when we've got code in the switch statement. And we just need to add a default expression to a default case, and we'll return -1 for the default. So that's doing the same as it was before. And one thing that I was about to miss then, but when we have int days equals a switch statement, we just need to put a semicolon on the end of the full statement. So now we run this, the result is the same as before, but we've compacted our switch statement down quite a bit. I'm going to create a new class here called myRecord. And in it I'm going to have a string. I'm going to say private string. The record's going to have a name and the record is going to have an integer, and I'm going to call that value. Now if you've been using Eclipse for a while, you probably know you can generate an awful lot of code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to source generate constructor using fields, so I can create my record with a name and value in there. I'm going to generate getters and setters. Source generate getters and setters. I'll select them all, and then we have getters and setters for name and value. I'm going to generate a hash code function and an equals function. So there we've got the hash code, which is creating a unique value according to the fields in the class, and an equals where we're going to check through the various fields and see if it's equal to another object. And I'm also going to generate a toString method using the fields. So that's our record class, all automatically generated and all used an awful lot when we're defining things in Java. So in our records example, we're going to create two records. They're both identical, just to check that the equals method works. And we're going to system out print line. We're just on record. The first one, we're going to print the name, the value, the hash code, whether it's equal to record 2, and the string. So there's our output to that. Now in Java 14, because of all that code we've generated, which is a bit wasteful really, in Java 14 we can define a record, and what we can do is we can say public record instead of class my record, and in brackets we can put string name int value, and that's it. We can get rid of everything else. Now if we look at records example, the only difference is when we access the values, we don't have get, we just do record.name, record.value. If we run again, we get the same as before. So we've got the name, the value, the hash code, it's equal to record 2, and there's a toString method just as it was before. So that's a real shortcut way of doing things in Java 14 using records. It's worth noting that in Java records the fields are final and private, so you can't have setters. Thanks for watching.